The latest bracketology shaping up thusly for the Big Ten. Purdue, not just a 1 seed, but the #1 overall seed. Illinois a 4. Wisconsin down a spot from Tuesday. They are now a 6. Northwestern up a spot. They are a 7. Michigan State hasn't played since the weekend. They're still a 9. Nebraska goes from 9 to 10. And Iowa now among the first 4 out. So let's go team by team. We'll start with Purdue. They haven't played since Sunday. Mike, I know you think they have the best resume by a significant margin. Tell us why.
Well, there are so many things we've talked about before. Their record against the top. We look back at the bracket reveal, and they had beaten 6 of the top teams, the 4 teams in each seed region. That's 16 overall. They had beaten 6 of them. 6 out of 15, pretty good. No one else had beaten 2 at that point. I don't think that's changed much. One of the things I came up with today was that they have played 15 of their 25 games to date against quad 1 and 2, and that will be 18 of 28 by the time they get through, because their next 3 games are all quad 1. And one of the other things, they have played 22 games against the first 3 quadrants to this point in the season. And that's remarkable. Houston, 18, UConn, 16, Arizona, 20. So no one has come close to the difficulty of schedule that they have played. Some of that is the Big Ten. Some of that was the trip to Maui and arranging the games against Alabama and Arizona on neutral floors. It's been a really challenging schedule to get them ready for this conference as well as for March.
So it was actually in Honolulu. I was there. And I will tell you that one of the hidden gems of these MTEs, they call them, these multi-team events, or hidden sort of things about them, is that if you win that first game, you are almost guaranteed game 2 and 3 to play teams that now in February and March are going to help you. When you lose that first game, now you're in a different pool and you can leave this event without playing quality teams. Purdue beat Gonzaga. And there was a lot of squawking at the beginning. Oh, my God, for both sides. They matched up Purdue and Gonzaga right off the bat. So what happened? Purdue beats Gonzaga, and they have elite 3 games. Gonzaga loses, and they have to play Syracuse and UCLA. Ultimately, Maine got nothing out of that.
Yeah.
And so that's what's going back to that was what started everything for Purdue. And by the way, in a year where it's Indy and Detroit, even if they were to lose these last 3, they're going to be in Indy and then maybe Detroit.
And has impacted things potentially for Gonzaga as well, as they try to win their way in. Did get the nice win over Kentucky, beat San Francisco last night, but they are not a shoo-in by any stretch. Illinois holding steady after the wild win over Minnesota, so still a 4 seed. Mike, remind people why that top 4 seed matters as we head towards Selection Sunday.
Well, there is a protection level relative to other members of your conference. They can't be put in the same, as a top 4 seed, they can't be in the same region with Purdue, for instance. And I think that's probably not a bad thing to be away from the Boilermakers. I think that one of the interesting things about Illinois is that there's still climbing potential for them. The issue with their resume to this point has largely been the absence of achievement against the upper half of quad 1. When the committee looks at the team sheets, each quadrant is separated into upper half and lower half. So there are games that are quad 1, like Nebraska's trip to Ohio State last night, which would have been good, but not an elite victory. Obviously, Illinois has at least one significant chance in that category when Purdue comes to town. They also have tomorrow the big game against Wisconsin. That would be an absolutely great win for them to get. And they close with a road game at Iowa. So that's 3 quad 1 opportunities. I'm not ruling out the possibility that they could climb to a 3 if they can finish strong. It's not going to be easy for them to lose the 4 spot because what's behind them isn't great. The 5 seeds are not exceptional. So if Illinois just produces as they have most of the year, they should hold the 4. But I still think the 3 is there in reach.
Location. I'm curious if Mike would agree with me. In other years, if Kentucky was higher, you would say, okay, Purdue's in Indy for sure. Who's the other sort of quadrant? Well, Kentucky, closer from Lexington, Indianapolis. But with Kentucky being below that, there's a great shot that Illinois could be that other, higher seeded team in the quadrant in Indy. Obviously, that location would be great for the Illini to help them win 2 games to get to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it would be incredibly advantageous as they look to get out of the first weekend for the first time since 2005. Again, the schedule really tough down the stretch. Wisconsin and Iowa on the road, and then the home game that Mike alluded to against Purdue. Let's talk about Wisconsin. They've lost 6 of 8, Mike. They've gone from 6th in the nation in the rankings, which I understand don't have anything to do with bracketology, but certainly a reflection of how well they were thought of, how highly they were thought of, to now they're a 6th seed in your bracket. It is important to note that you're not judged like you used to be in the old days on how did you do in your last 10 games. It's not going to keep you out. There's an understanding that the schedules don't necessarily equate. You have some teams who finish with tougher games or start with tougher ones. But that being said, this isn't really the direction you want to be trending here down the stretch.
Not at all. It's been problematic. It seemed like they had gotten through it, and then they dipped back down against Indiana. It still isn't a bad resume, and one that if they could just juice it up a little bit over these last few games and in Minneapolis, there's still a possibility that they could get to a decent seed, possibly even a protected seed at the 4 line. That's going to be tough to do, but it's not impossible. But you look at the 5 seeds. On the 5 line, the Dayton has 7 wins against quads 1 and 2. San Diego State 8. BYU and Clemson both 9. Wisconsin has 12.
Yeah.
So the differential between those two is not significant. And what happens if you get into that 5 line is instead of having to play a top 3 seed in the second round, you get a chance to play someone who is more or less your equal in round 2, a 4 seed. So I think that would be really helpful for Wisconsin if they could climb to there. And I think it also would be really helpful for them if they just started to play like they're capable of playing, like they did for so long, and then everything else would take care of itself.
Yeah, the danger zone for the Badgers are if they stay in the 6th spot. I mean, it's more than likely the 11 they would play is going to be from a Power 5 or Power 6 conference. So it's a much more difficult first-round opponent than if you were at a 4 or 5. So right off the bat, you're on your heels and you're going to be challenged. You know, this is a team that clearly is got its bad habits back of not closing well, of taking some poor shots, and the schedule is not advantageous down the stretch. I mean, you've got Illinois at home, you've got Rutgers at home, and then they end at Purdue. And so these aren't get-better games because the weekend games are going to be incredibly difficult, and then in the one in the middle, not easy to score against. And they've already had trouble against Rutgers. And Rutgers has had success with some of these people on this the team in Madison. So this is a real tough stretch before we even get to Minnesota.
The schedule has been great, to Mike's point, and they had so much good work that they did early on here in the year that will benefit them. And man, you talk about a team that challenged themselves. They only have 6 games all year outside of quads 1 and 2. It is a really difficult schedule, one of the best in the country. So going to run through the rest of the bracketology here with Mike, and pretty remarkable the way Northwestern has reinvented itself after losing Ty Berry for the season with a knee injury. They're 4-1 without him, despite the fact the offense has really declined. You see the 3-point percentage here. Their overall field goal percentage without him is under 39%. They were shooting better than 47% with him. They've made up for it, though, on the defensive end and on the glass, where they have made some significant jumps. And, Mike, this is a team you now have as a 7 seed. They were a 7 a year ago as well. They got another quad 1 win this week. Got at Maryland, not just without Ty Berry, but without Ryan Langborg as well. How do you see the Cats? Because I know it's a little bit of a strange resume given the quad 4 loss and given how low the net ranking is.
You know, it's interesting. This team is fascinating. What they've accomplished is almost ridiculous. To be able to lose Ty Berry and to be able to continue to win, and then to go on the road to play without Ty, and to lose another starter in Ryan Langborg, who essentially was to be the replacement and was during the games he was able to play, was filling in beautifully for what Ty Berry produced. And then they're able to win anyway. It's just a remarkable achievement. And we all know that Chris Collins did a phenomenal job a year ago to get them into the tournament and have them be as successful as they are. But this might be even a more impressive coaching job, what he's done over the last month than last year's great work was. Relative to the tournament, I think that what puts them on the 7 line is they're now 10-7 against quads 1 and 2. They have done an amazing job with their resume metrics. You mentioned the net ranking. Ken Palm is low too. Ken Palm's at 40, or Ken Palm and BPI average, I should say, is at 40. But their resume metrics put them at 20. I mean, that's a 5 seed. To be able to be there is really impressive. So I can't say enough about what Northwestern has done in really difficult circumstances. To lose a terrific starter like Ty Berry for the entire rest of the season and to step forward in the way that they have. I think they're fairly safely in, but you certainly want to take care of at least one of the final 3 games, and I think in their minds they want to do more than just take care of Minnesota at home. They're going to want to take Iowa down at home this weekend, as well as try to go and make a good representation at Michigan State.
Yeah, both those conference home games against desperate teams, Iowa and Minnesota. So it'll be interesting to see if Langborg plays or not tomorrow. Michigan State hasn't played since your last bracket came out. We all know the deal. They've made 25 straight NCAA tournaments. They are 3 games under 500 against the top 2 quads. How solid is Michigan State?
Yeah, what makes them solid, you go back to the Baylor game that they played back in December. That was huge. The win over Illinois that was close, and they closed it out. And that was the Sparty we expected to see as this season progressed. Once they did that Illinois comeback and clinch down the stretch, how well they performed under pressure, we really expected to see more of that, and it hasn't been evident often since the Illinois game. What certainly helps them is that the predictive metrics still love Michigan State. And the resume metrics aren't bad. They're in the 40s, around 43. That's a tournament team, so they can be fairly confident that what they've done lately hasn't taken them out of the field. However, it did take them away from the opportunity to climb into a more impressive seed, a more advantageous seed than what they'll probably end up with. They're trending at this point toward a double-digit seed. And I'm not sure that's the worst thing possible because it would get them out of an 8-9 game. But the way they're performing, I mentioned this earlier on the show, and I still think it bears watching. They look like a perfect 8-9 game because they're going to compete well enough against the 8 or the 9 that would be opposite them, but they wouldn't be a huge threat to the number 1 with the way they're playing. And they're certainly their predictive metrics would justify a seed in that range. So I kind of think that's where they'll end up unless something drastic changes.
How about Nebraska? They missed out on that quad 1 opportunity last night, as we talked about, against Ohio State. Currently a 10 seed. What do the Huskers need to do to ensure that they are in that bracket for the first time in 10 years?
Yeah, it's not a super difficult stretch for them. Which is both good and bad because it makes it hard for them to climb, and that's why that Ohio State win Thursday night would have been so great to have because it would have given them another quad 1. I think they need to close well because the schedule isn't demanding, and that's the most important element of it. Taking care of business, we call it in the bracket biz. You're supposed to beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and that's where they stand now. Take care of those. We'll see where they fall in the bracket. You mentioned they fell out of the chance, at least as of now, to be on to open the tournament on Friday in the quarterfinals. But it's still possible for them to climb back, and we'll see how that goes. But they have to take care of business down the stretch to avoid getting themselves into the conversation with the teams that are fighting just for survival.
Hey, Mike, give me 30 seconds on Iowa.
Yeah, Iowa, they've made themselves relevant now, and that's a great thing. But when you're in the circumstance that they are in, which at this point for me is the 4th team out, so 1, 2, 3 ahead of them, then 4th out. There's a lot of movement available for them. Those teams in that range have been losing like crazy. I had almost every team that I had in my bubble watch for Sporting News last week. Out of 15 teams, 12 of them lost last week, and multiple lost twice in the last week. So if they just continue to win, they may find themselves in the tournament almost automatically. Just continue to win games. I know that means they're intersecting with other teams that are on the bubble or trying to fight for seed. But if they continue to win, and they've certainly played well enough to do that lately, they will find themselves in a position where they may end up in the bracket.
2 quad 1 games, though, left for them. Northwestern on the road, Illinois at home. So not maybe easier said than done to just keep winning. But if you do that, you certainly reinforce the resume.